My name's Keith Brunquist. I'm 72 years old, and my dad and mom bought this airplane in February of 1954. So I was barely 2 years old. I've been around it all my life, and it's just such a unique visual shape. You know, there's nothing else like this in the whole world. And it's specialty built, as anybody could see looking at it. Boeing kind of started with a plain sheet of paper, and they had about a month to design this airplane, as I understand, for a contract that was let in 1946. They came up with something really unique that can fly super slow, very stable platform, and it's easy to maintain. It's just a thrill to be around. It's just a fun airplane to fly, very comfortable cockpit, and always wanted all my life. I rode in this as a little kid with my dad, and I always wanted to fly it, and now I have. My dad was an aircraft mechanic for Boeing at Renton in Washington, and that's where I was born. And shortly after I was born, they had a slowdown there at Boeing, and they laid him off and offered to keep him on at about 2/3 the wages that they'd been paying him. And he had my older brother and myself and a wife, and of course that didn't work for him. And he was always the black sheep of the family, so he headed up to Anchorage, Alaska in the summer of 1952, which is still just a territory at that point, and got on with U.S. Fish and Wildlife there at Lake Hood in Anchorage, Alaska. That's the world's largest seaplane base. So they hired him as an A&P mechanic, and before long they acquired the fleet of the remaining Boeing XL and YL-15s. So he actually got to work on these, and then eventually they sold these at auction. So about a 5-year-old airplane when Mom and Dad were high bidder on this plane. Been in the family now 70 years. We moved out to Spenard Lake, waterfront property, then when I was like 6 years old. And since we had waterfront property, Dad put this thing on floats, and they were designed to put on 24, 25 ETOs. So he flew it off the water there pretty much the rest of the time that he had it. And he quit flying it in 1966. It had a cylinder problem, so the engine was missing, and the control surfaces were originally covered with grade A cotton, and those were getting to where they wouldn't punch in the green anymore. He always intended to restore it, but he just never had the time, and he never had a hangar to put it in. So it sat outside until he died in 1994. My two brothers and I inherited this plane and 2 other aircraft that he had, and I'd already bought one of these when I was 20 years old. So now I own 4 of the remaining 7 aircraft that existed. And I didn't actually start this aircraft until 2003. We took it down to the very last nut and bolt, and everything was new old stock parts that my dad had, like the plexiglass. All the windows in here were from 1949. And I had a lot of things like push rods and bell cranks, and we pretty much worked on this Monday through Friday from 6 at night till midnight, sometimes 1, 2 in the morning. Tried to work all day Saturday and then relax a little bit on Sunday, but it's thousands of hours of my time, and Brian Porterfield's time especially too. I got my first ride in the back seat of this since I was like 15 years old. It had been nearly 50 years grounded since my dad had last flown it. We flew into Oshkosh the first time for me. I'd been there once before, but never flown in. And we barely got it on the ground, and we're just surrounded by people. I hadn't hardly even shut the engine down, and they were pestering us from the get-go to have the bird judged. So on the very last day, when judging registration ended, Wayne Borman, one of the linemen there at Oshkosh that had been coming around, and we met him right at the start, and he kept bugging me daily to go sign up for judging, and he finally twisted my arm. I went, okay, I'll do it. We ran over to the judging shack and signed up. The EAA group wanted to photograph me in flight, and so Kathy and I jumped in it and flew wing on the EAA's Cessna 210 RG with about 4 photographers, and we went out and did about an hour-and-a-half aerial air-to-air session, which was pretty exciting. Came back in and we were cleaning the bugs off, and about 30 judges showed up, no kidding. And they swarmed the plane and they asked a zillion questions, and I pointed out things like all the screw heads are indexed north, south, east, and west, and all the new old stock like the cowling hold downs and things like this, just all kinds of goodies. We went to the awards banquet, and about the last award that they gave out was for Grand Champion post-World War II Warbird. And they showed a picture of the Boeing on the screen, and we about fell out of our chairs. It was an incredible thing to win that. And then I was awarded the gold wrench for the restoration that took 13 years.